Well, there you go. You're back and live now, boss. So why don't you
Okay.
give us your weekly update?
My weekly update, such as it is. It's been crazy here. Um, let's see. I guess we have been chasing down huge numbers of different leads for pots of money that belong to either the American government or the American people. And we've been engaged in quite a few different negotiations to get money back from foreign governments and from banks and various institutions that have been holding money for the United States of America. We've also been made aware of several very large bequests that have been left by wealthy individuals in support of our government, in the anticipation that someday or another we'd wake up and we would then take back our government and begin operating our government, bring the states into session, which is what we've done, and overcome the hurdles that were put in our place by our British and Holy Roman Empire subcontractors. Anyway, this has been very interesting. We've made a lot of progress on those various opportunities and issues, done a lot of research into those. The bank people are working around the clock, as you might guess. And there have been a couple of attempts to get us involved in something or accuse us of some wrongdoing in the banking industry, but that's ridiculous because we're not even part of their banking industry. We are in a different jurisdiction. Our banks of commerce go land to air, not sea to air. And so once again, there are efforts to try to confuse everybody as to the role and identity of the individuals or groups that are pursuing these issues. The Brits are once again trying to confuse us with them or them with us, and we're not taking it anymore. It's aggravated identity theft, and it is now a well-recognized crime that they're guilty of. So we're shoving that to them as it deserves to be shoved to them as quickly and as expeditiously as possible the moment that it shows up. And so we've had a couple of incidents where attorney generals and that sort have tried to make claims, false claims, against us and banks that they have misidentified as banks of commerce operating in the sea jurisdiction, when in fact they're commercial banks operating on the land jurisdiction. Anyway, interesting kinds of discussions and fisticuffs going on with all of that. Overall, I would say we've made good progress this week, and we are all looking forward to a few days of, I wouldn't say exactly a holiday, though everyone is going to take off Christmas Day. We will also be working between Christmas and New Year and trying to wrap up some of this stuff so that we can get to the fun part. The Trump administration is obviously going pillar to post with a lot of different information leaking out from all corners, some of it quite crazy, actually, with attempts to do things that they can't do, attempts to go back and do things like privateer licensing. Obviously, the politicians are suffering some large degree of pressure on them by the cartels and are bulking at using the military to do what the military is hired to do. And so now they're looking for private subcontractors to act as legalized pirates on the high seas to go out and intercept the cartel boats that are bringing drugs and materials to make drugs into this country. We had just recently gotten to the point of getting everybody to stop issuing privateer licenses except for the British monarchy. So this is a considerable step backward and yet another indication of just how backward, upside down, and sideways the misadministration of this country and of the British Isles, the homelands, and the Commonwealth have been. There is nothing about this situation that would predicate the use of private piracy, which is exactly what a privateer is, legalize piracy to intercept drug shipments. We have a Coast Guard for that exact purpose. Why aren't they using the Coast Guard? Why are they bringing in the Navy? If they need to increase Coast Guard resources quickly, they can decommission a ship in the Navy and recommission it as a ship in the Coast Guard. But instead of doing that and legally intercepting these drug boats, they've been waffling around and using the actual U.S. Navy for this, which is not really within the description, the job description of the U.S. Navy. So just some observations for you on that score. Instead of batting around the idea of privateers, they should be beefing up the Coast Guard. However, I understand that they do have some corruption issues within the Coast Guard, where some senior Coast Guard officials have been caught working for the cartels, the drug cartels. So there's a lot of corruption that has gone on here, a lot of smuggling, a lot of infiltration into the agencies that are supposed to be protecting us, and they've been bought off or they've been compromised in some other way, so that it's difficult for us to rely upon our conventional infrastructure and institutions that allow us to keep control of the border and to keep smuggling of various kinds to a minimum. So anyway, this has been going on for the last couple of weeks, really heavy duty, constant attacks of various kinds. Venezuela has only added to the situation by basically thumbing their noses in Trump's face and setting up a agreement with China to do an oil substation with that accepts yuan as a currency. And so Mexico has tried to claim back oil resources that they lost fair and square in the Spanish-American War. Just all sorts of crazy things where people are trying to interpret history that they aren't that familiar with, and are then making commercial claims based on incorrect history. And there's nobody but us who are standing in the way and saying, oh, wait a minute, no, that doesn't actually go that way. And so it's been a very busy week for us in terms of historical research and bringing forward into discussion the different claims that have been made against American resources and American land resources and all sorts of other things that have happened. So I think one of the important things for everyone here to recognize and realize is that a lot of this discussion is about inheritance. And inheritance is a separate subject apart from commercial claims. So the kind of the wild, bizarre commercial claims that have been addressed to us should be addressed to England. And we really have nothing to do with it. We've been shed of British overlords since 1783. So again, they are practicing this business of trying to confuse people as to who's who. And so the Brits are trying to confuse the rest of the world into thinking that they're acting as Americans when in fact they're acting as British subjects. And then they're trying to misidentify us as the Brits. It's very, very frustrating. And I'm afraid that Mr. Trump is one of the worst offenders in that regard, and his administration in general, because they can't seem to get very simple concepts through their heads. At which point we have to step back and say, no, and the title of a recent article was, no, it's too stupid, it has to be on purpose, or something of that nature. Because you look at it and you realize that there's no way that they could make a mistake of this magnitude. There's no way that there can be an honest misunderstanding. And just as with what's happened with the EU this past week, in which they basically went beyond the process of freezing Russian assets in the EU. They actually seized and stole Russian assets in the EU to the tune of about $245 billion worth of Russian investments in the countries of the European Union. And Russia looked at that and correctly brought suit against Euroclear, which is the big clearinghouse in the European Union that is responsible for all of this sort of stuff. And so now there's a lawsuit which the Russians are guaranteed to win. The European Union tried to make up for this whole fiasco and the fact that they were unapologetically stealing Russian assets by making the return of the assets contingent on Russia paying Ukraine war reparations, which is none of the EU's business whatsoever and is part of the peace process. So anyway, and think of it this way, they've crossed the Rubicon, just like Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon back into Rome and declaring a military dictatorship over the Roman Republic. It's the same kind of move on the part of the EU. They have now politicized basic business practices and asset protections to the point where it's no longer safe for people to do business in Europe. And as a result, there's this mass migration of assets, foreign assets, out of Europe. I mean, you can stand from a long distance away, and believe me, Big Lake Alaska is a long way away from Europe. And you can hear the giant sucking sound as all of the assets vacate Europe. And they do this because it's no longer safe to have your assets in Europe if at any time you do something or have a policy or a need or whatever that does not agree with the European Union's political bent, then they think that they can take your assets and can use whatever excuse to seize upon your property. Now, this was really bad business on the part of the EU, just in terms of losing your good reputation and your, your record of being fair and leaving business matters out of the politics. But it was even astoundingly bad judgment on the balance, because they basically stole $245 billion worth of Russian assets that were in the European Union countries. And the Russians then took action to nationalize and seize upon $800 billion worth of European Union investments that were either in Russia or in Russian territory. So you can see that this was a gigantic boondoggle and debacle for the European Union, and it's one that is unlikely to be recoverable at any time in the near future. Because once you have broken that trust, and once you have actually outright stolen somebody's assets based on political reasons, then you are no longer a trustworthy business partner. You're no longer a trustworthy destination for foreign assets. And what that does is it absolutely curtails business options for generations to come. And I look at that and it makes no sense unless you want to collapse the euro, collapse the European economy, and forestall new foreign investments in the EU for decades to come. Yet that's exactly what they've done. It's that same sort of craziness and self-destruction that has been apparent in the immigration crisis, where anybody with a brain would not allow what has gone on in Europe. Any national government worth its salt would not allow what's going on in France, Germany, England, or the United States. And yet that's what we have here, is this suicidal, lemming-like rush toward self-destruction. And you have all of these corporation presidents that are actually working for foreign interests, colluding together toward this end result. Now, there is no doubt in my mind, and there really shouldn't be any doubt in your mind, that Keir Starmer has created situations that are essentially treason against the British government. And this past week, it was very clear that the King, Charles III, in one of his final departing acts, recognized that it was treasonous and that Starmer was secretly negotiating to surrender British sovereignty to the European Union. Now, all of a sudden, this is all hushed up again. Explain to me how that happens. Obviously, there's something going on in Europe that is, as my grandmother said, something's rotten in Denmark. And it's rotten in Buckingham Palace, and it's rotten in France, it's rotten in Germany. It's not something that is limited to Britain, but it's self-evident that the leadership of these corporations is not playing for the home team. None of them are playing for the home team. They are absolutely pursuing a self-destructive course in terms of the countries as countries. And so what we're looking at is treason on an unimaginable scale. And we've been out there doing what we can to shed light on these matters from our historical research and from our individual research into different aspects of this, the migration crisis, and we'll call it the crisis of ecclesiastical law, and the impersonation schemes that have been used to pass off corporations in the business of providing government services with actual governments, which started in England. So as we go into this last week of the year, we have a situation in which it appears that the British government has been vacated on the land jurisdiction for almost 300 years. Well, actually slightly over 300 years. And the only ones that are holding up the entirety of the British Empire are the hereditary stewards. So the question becomes, what happens now? Do those who have made such an incredible botch of things come back and depend upon the stewards to rise up and act as the trustees in the absence of the sovereign nation being represented either by a sovereign or a prime minister or a president in the proper jurisdiction? And the question is, we don't know. We don't know how this is going to resolve. And it leads to a lot of other questions. At what point do we say that the fraud tainted everything from this point forward? And once we do that, by what means are we going to erase 150, 160 years of history and lawmaking and everything else that has developed in this intervening time? I mean, entire countries have come and gone, have been erased from the map and replaced with other governments and other nations. How are we supposed to set back the clock that far? And there are a lot of things of this type, a lot of questions of this type that we're grappling with as best we may. And I want you to be aware that just finding a set point where we can kind of scrape down to the bedrock and rebuild with security again is a major issue. Just as the value of currency is a major issue. And these are fundamentals that we have to get right, because if we don't get them right from the beginning, everything that we build will eventually just scatter and be like a sandcastle. It will just dissolve, which we're actually looking at right now with the de facto government. It wasn't set up right in the first place, and it doesn't have any actual authority, any actual granted authority to act in all of these venues that are related to the land and soil jurisdiction and our physical assets. So because it wasn't set up right in the first place, it's now faced with dissolution. We don't want to keep doing that. We want to get everything back on solid ground, and we want to restore the lawful government that we're owed and just start out fresh and new and do it right. and face those questions that we need to face. One of the chief questions we will need to face going forward is to understand what went wrong so that we don't make the same mistakes again. And that will take up, I'm sure, a lot of discussion time over the next year. Other things that have come up this past week is, the beginning of preparation to restore and reopen as an active offices of the national government in Philadelphia. So we have people that are in charge of the monuments of the National Park Service, and we have people that are busily scouting out government office space and things of that nature in Philadelphia. But that's going to be a considerable effort, and we're hoping that many of the patriot organizations that have advocated the restoration of our national government, our seat of government in Philadelphia, will come forward and assist and help with manpower and ideas, and that we will not be in this endeavor alone. But whether we're alone or whether we're joined by a great number of other patriot organizations in the restoration work, it nonetheless has to be done. Because at this point, so far as the rest of the world knows, our seat of government in Philadelphia has been all but deserted for 160 years. And although we were able to preserve our post office in Philadelphia, it was a touch and go endeavor right from the start, and we cannot afford to let it continue to be that kind of hanging by a thread. We need to not only reopen our post office, which we've already done, but we need to reopen our fundamental service offices for our national government in Philadelphia. We need to have a place where a Continental Congress can meet. We need to review the very essential basic functions of government in terms of how we, as a nation built of many nations, can respond to the modern world. We're looking at the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence coming up here within the next year. And that invites us to contemplate the Declaration and the words of the Declaration, and to understand the functions and processes of the Declaration to a greater extent than we've ever understood it in the course of our sort of slipshod educational system. I want to bring your attention to the fact that the actual working document, the final declaration, is called the Unanimous Declaration of Independence. There are numerous declarations of independence that went into the notice and declaration process from the very start. And as a result of the fact that the declaration had to be issued in all three international jurisdictions, you will find that there are multiple versions of the Declaration of Independence that are almost the same, but not quite. For example, one of the key bits of evidence that you can readily observe is whether or not a copy of the Declaration was issued with the standard date, say, July 4, 1776, with a comma between the 4 and the 1776, or was it written out July 4th, 1776, or 4 July 1776? Every time those styles of date change, you're looking at a change in jurisdiction. You're looking at a copy of the Declaration that was tweaked and actually identified as serving notice in a different jurisdiction of the law. And all of these different varieties of declarations were used to make sure that the proper notice was available and self-evident, and so that when we got to the end of the road, win or lose, we would be set up to actually secure a lasting victory. So I anticipate that we're going to be taking more time and looking more deeply into our founding document, which is the Declaration of Independence. We're going to become more aware of the fact that there's more than one jurisdictional declaration of independence, because when as the colonies declared, they had to declare on air, land, and sea, as well as soil. And they did so. And those rather minute changes are going to be something that we examine to help determine the veracity of our position, but also to better understand the history that went into this. We did win what's called in Europe the War of Independence, and we have the peace process to prove it. That part is not going to go away, but our own appreciation of the complexity of that process and what it took our forefathers 8 long years to accomplish, that appreciation needs to rest heavily on every American heart. And we all need to know that it wasn't just getting up on a Sunday morning and deciding, oh yes, well, we're all going to declare independence and it's all going to be so hunky-dory. It was nothing like that at all. And as we contemplate the process that went into creating the Declaration of Independence and all of the affected international and national jurisdictions, I believe that we will come to a better understanding and appreciation of our history and what it actually cost us to separate from Great Britain, and therefore what we cannot afford to lose, which is our separation now and forever from Great Britain. Those words are not going to be inspiring and aren't going to affect any warm, cozy effect for the Anglophiles and the British territorials, otherwise known as Tories, who have basically commandeered our government, our federal government, and our state governments under false pretenses. They're in a position where they've done something highly illegal, highly improper, highly in breach of trust, and gotten away with it for 160 years. Think about that. That's a lot of water under the bridge. That's a lot of obfuscation and deliberate effort to obscure the truth from the population. And now that we come to the end of the great fraud, where it has been fully recognized and where people all over the world are understanding why the government of the United States, or what appears to be the government of the United States, isn't really American. Even if it started out to be American, it has been commandeered and is not and has not been under the control of the Americans for a long time. So hopefully we'll pick up our bootstraps and look at our founding document with new eyes. We'll realize that the same evils that our forefathers declared and cited in the Declaration of Independence are with us now, and that they come from the same source, which is the British government. Now, I'm at pains to say that this is not about the British people. This is about the British government. And basically, the British government has been at the bottom of every dog pile we've examined since we started this nigh on 50 years ago. They have been very consistent in being one of the chief perpetrators of warmongering and commercial deceit and fraud. So we can't get away from that fact in order to make people feel happier about their good reputation, because what's going on in the British home islands is really no different than what's happened in the Commonwealth countries or what's happened here in the United States. They've all been equally abused. So all of the living people throughout the former Commonwealth, all of the people of the United States, all the people of Western Europe, and a great many other nations besides, have been abused in exactly the same way. And so I'm not blaming the British people for this. They've been victims every bit as much as we have. I'm not blaming the people of Canada for any of this. Same story. I'm looking at this in terms of the commercial corporations and municipal corporations that colluded to bring us to this point. And I'm looking at the great fraud that has been committed against the living people of this world by corporate entities and their managers. So please don't think that I'm anti British people. I'm not. The British government has been extremely unaccountable, extremely focused on enrichment, and has certainly failed the trust that was placed in it, even as a federal subcontractor, much less the trust that the British people so freely gave to their government, or what they thought was their government. Throughout all of the miseries that have ensued since the Crimean War, through the First World War, through the Second World War, and through an endless panoply of smaller incursions ever since the war in the Crimea. Now, I think that we need to go back, if we're going to understand what's going on now, we all need to dust off our history books and take a look at the Crimean War, because that is going to give us insight into what has gone on with Ukraine. And Ukraine is a clear and present danger for everyone that is listening to this broadcast tonight. The military, I should say that the military that was converted into a private mercenary force in 1861 has been compelled to sing for its suffer ever since. They've been hired out to various highest bidders to do things which are often unsavory and unjustified at best. They've had to serve colonialist interests. They've had to serve anti-humanity interests. And they are continuing to struggle with the idea that they don't have money and that they have to have money to operate. And if they don't have money to operate, they can't fulfill their job, their mission. And so they're all balled up like snakes in a pit, trying to work through these fiscal issues, which they really don't have to worry about. It's just that they do not understand the situation that they're in. And they don't see how the civilian government, the lawful government, can break them out of this 160-year-old nightmare. And yet that is the case. We are the missing piece. We are the ones that can solve this and put the broken pieces back together. We do have the standing to do that. We do have the states of the Union. We are the Americans. And so we can do what the military cannot do. And the issue is standing. Now, I've tried to bring this forward to everybody before. Standing is one of the key principles of law. And it just amounts to this. You can't speak to things that are outside your jurisdiction. You can't speak to things that do not lie under your authority. Standing here flat-footed in Big Lake, Alaska, as an Alaskan, I have no business telling the government in Spain what to do. All right? I lack the standing to impose upon them. And in the same way, the government of Spain has no right or standing to impose upon the Alaskan government, right? So the military has been operating in the jurisdiction of the sea since the 1860s and has no standing with regard to the land except the territorial lands that were left in their care, like the British Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. But when it comes to the states of the Union, they have no mission beyond that stage of territorial development that precedes enrollment as a state of the Union under the Northwest Ordinance. And for us, one of the big moments came when we had a sufficient number of the states and people correctly identified and were able to declare in good faith and with justification the enrollment of all the territorial states as states of the Union, which occurred on October 1st, 2020. It was certainly one of the proudest moments of my husband's life to see this happen after more than 150 years of being in limbo. All those states, all those people, all those resources left in a state of perpetual waiting. I used to call them states in waiting because they had completed all of the development milestones required to become states of the Union and yet had not been enrolled as states of the Union. So that was a very important milestone for the state governments, the state assemblies, and for the Federation of States also, in that we managed to pull it all together, get everybody organized, be properly identified, prove our standing with regard to the issues, and enroll those states that have been waiting since the Civil War to be enrolled as states of the Union. So everybody take a moment, take a deep breath, pat yourselves on the back and say, yay, we accomplished something major there that had been hanging fire for over 150 years. Something crucial for the benefit of our country and our countrymen. And we thank you all. That thank you coming on this Christmas season should be especially heartfelt this year when so much hangs in the balance and so many different parties are coming forward trying to blur the issues, if I can describe it in that way. And our claims are there, they're firmly lodged, and they're not going anyplace. So we did it right, and we're here to basically revert the trust interest back to America and Americans. All that is going on, all of that's being, all these different issues are coming forward and are constantly being researched, constantly being brought forward in diplomatic realms and argued out in front of courts. All sorts of actions are going on right now to ascertain not a standing is number one, ownership interest is number two, inheritance interest is number three. And we are all working really hard here, harder than we should actually, to bring forward the American claim to America. And I know that sounds crazy to some of you, but you have to realize that our land jurisdiction government has been vacant since 1861. A lot has gone on since then. And so we'll continue to be we'll be continuing to go through this entire process of defining and redefining and proving and arguing different points. But the important point I want to make to you all is that because of the Federation, you do have good claims, you have good solid claims in all the jurisdictions, you do have standing. And so that's something to be thankful for this Christmas season. It means your country is not going to just disappear off a map. It means that your assets are not going to be stolen as the Russian assets were stolen in the European Union countries. You are still on the game board and you still have a viable government. And it's because of our efforts right here at the American States Assembly. It's your state assembly that is standing in the way of legalized piracy. It's your state assembly that is standing in the way of creditors of the Brits coming here and seizing our assets under the false presumption that we are British subjects. There's so much that's been done and so much that's come about as a simple result of each one of you claiming your American heritage, your American birthright, and joining together in support of your state assemblies. And as each one of you have stood up, and as each state assembly has stood up, our country as a whole has regained traction and regained credibility. And as we prove our knowledge, and we prove our identity, and we prove our determination, each day brings us closer to a resolution and a settlement of these issues that will be fair and lasting and true. So I guess that's what I wanted to share with you this week. We have come to a point where the diplomatic issues have become very important, and we are able to maintain our position in spite of a lot of counterclaims, in spite of a lot of doubt, in spite of a lot of downright criminal maneuvering trying to steal assets or misrepresent us. And so here's to the brave people of the Federation who have put themselves in the way of any international mischief, shall we say, and who have dedicated their time, their lives, their homes, their money, and everything else to saving this country and saving the people of this country and maintaining our heritage. So I suspect there will be at least a few questions. And the only other thing I wanted to say was basically, God bless everybody. I hope that you all have wonderful holiday seasons and that you all have the opportunity to rest and relax and enjoy time with your families. Because at the end of the day, that's what's important. The time that we share together in peace, the time that we have to rest and be at peace. So I will wish you all a wonderful holiday season and hope that within a very short time now, we are actively engaged in restoring our national capital in Philadelphia and are making the kinds of progress that we need to make toward the recoupment of a great deal of money and credit that other people in other nations were using that actually belongs to us. Yo, Shannon.
Sorry, I was already talking and I forgot to unmute myself.
Welcome to the
It
club.
happens.
It's that kind of day.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? Okay. Ask Anna, can't we implement the Doge restitution process? Anna, why can't they implement Doge to expedite the district court restitution, homes and property process? I think it would be an efficient, accurate, cost saving, and that's where they left off.
The short answer is because Doge is an executive function and we have to use the judicial system to correct judicial errors. But we could adapt a Doge-like approach, and we could do, a considerable amount of the research and record sorting and things of that nature could be computerized and expedited.
Okay, next. Is there still a chance that we will get access for Christmas to our accounts? If so, will this access be strictly for vendors? When will personal accounts be activated?
Folks, we
I'm
tried
still in last week's question, so.
Yeah, well, we tried our darndest, you can be assured of that. But there were a couple of things that came up at the last moment that made that delayed everything again. And it's not our fault. It's not the fault of the IT people. It's just the complexity of the situation and the kinds of arguments that occur at the diplomatic level. But I guess we would have liked to have had this resolved in time for Christmas, believe me. So
People are asking where to get transcripts of your webinar. That would be the TASA website, everybody.
yeah,
I am correct in that one, right?
yes, you are. And big thanks to our transcriptioners that go out there and every week extract the good stuff and make it possible for people who have hearing impairment to be able to read the gist of what goes on here, and also to make that available in a hard copy form that some people, myself included, find easier to use for reference purposes.
Okie dokie. And for our next question, so many are looking for proof with quotation marks around it about the court case in the World Court and how it will be known by the general public. This proof will help us populate our state assembly. So, is there a case number where we can show people what you're saying is true?
Well, the wire, as in Telegram confirmation has come out. I'm fairly sure that will be available this week to the general public. We have undergone a tremendous process, and it is still ongoing. There are a great many things that are still left up in the air, but at least some of the basics are being put in place that will allow us to function and go on and continue the process of transitioning the government back to a lawful government structure, and that will allow us to continue to trade and to have the use of our own money and our credit, and basically allow our country to make progress while it continues to do the work that needs to be done to completely restore our government. We're not going to start out being completely restored, folks. We're going to still be facing a long road ahead as we begin to pull things back together and regain control of the federal subcontractors. But anyway, all of that stuff is now more or less solidified and will be coming out. You'll be seeing things on the TV and you'll be seeing things in the newspapers, some of which is going to be kind of confusing because the Native nations have already declared their national status. And I want you to understand that in this country, Native nations have always been recognized as Native nations. And many different nations can occupy the same land and soil. So don't be overly confused or disturbed by the native land claims and native soil jurisdiction claims. Every native child born in this country has always had dual nationality. So this is really no different than the way it's always been. It's just that people are going to become aware of it and may have a lot of assumptions and questions about it that need to be answered, but cannot be addressed really until more people are aware of the fact that, oh, well, if you're a Winnebago and you're born in Wisconsin, you're both a member of the Ho-Chunka Nation, the Native nation, the tribe that you belong to, right? And you're a Wisconsinite. So all these people that are native to this country have always had dual nationality. And that's going to come to the fore in the next few weeks. And it may cause a lot of consternation and wrong assumptions and confusion. But keep in mind, that this is really no different than it's ever been. And it does not affect the fact that we have our own nation states. And those nation states are continuing to function in their own realm and sovereignty. So anyway, we'll be touching on all of that as the different court settlements are made. And again, that will be coming out soon. The settlement of the Holy Roman Empire Municipal Corporation bankruptcy is it's at the end of settlement worldwide, so it won't be much longer.
Okay, our next question comes to us all the way from Australia, Victoria, Australia. With what is unfolding in America, how long do you anticipate Australia to follow suit? Also, as the Assembly's job to protect the people and their assets whilst the General Assembly is under construction, what is the best process for noticing the district courts that their misadministration one of our declared recorded publishing people?
Well, you have assemblies gathering all over Australia. This is becoming a much more popular and better known situation. Like many other countries, Australia is actually more attuned to and aware of the British system than we have been in this country. And so I would say that the Aussies are right up there, neck and neck with the British and Irish, I should say the English and Irish assemblies in the homeland islands of the British Empire. And there shouldn't be a great deal of discrepancy or delay between, say, Canada being accorded its full standing and Australia being accorded its independent standing. You will notice that some provinces of Canada have recently moved to join the United States, which they can do. And so their process may be accelerated and their economic well-being may be more closely aligned with ours, simply because they are joining the United States, right? But none of the countries are going to be too far behind. I mean, this is a worldwide effort. It's a worldwide problem, and it is moving forward toward a worldwide solution. I guess I should say we're not leaving anyone behind.
Okay. All right. Next question. Release the bank. What is the delay? We are broke.
Well, unfortunately, this has been a plan that the British Empire and certain banks have had in place for over 100 years, and they have pursued that plan with great alacrity and diligence, with the result that they are well advanced in their plan of destroying the Federal Reserve note through hyperinflation. And that then basically steals the value of buying power and of life savings for the American public, and puts people in a situation where they can't pay the rent, they can't pay the mortgage, and still pay the electric bill and buy food and gas and the things that are necessary for life. So people are becoming increasingly desperate. And that's precisely where they want to get everyone. They want to get us into a situation where we can't pay our bills anymore, where we are destitute through the erosion of the money medium. And then they want to appear as our saviors on the horizon, the heroes, the blue coats coming up from the behind the hill, right? Trumpets blaring, and they want to pretend that they are our saviors when in fact they are the architects of all of this misery and have long been the architects of this misery. And what they will do is they will offer you a FedNow account. All of the private bank accounts in America were quietly converted into FedNow direct accounts back in the summer of 2023. So if you have a conventional bank account and you think it's in Fall River National Bank in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, think again. All of those quote unquote private bank accounts have been federalized and turned into FedNow accounts. And so everything is subject to a great deal of instant manipulation, which allows them to bail in or bail out or seize the assets in your accounts. All sorts of nasty mischief can occur. And this has been done by their control of the banking institutions. And so what I have observed and what their plan calls for is that they will cause so much misery and so much hyperinflation and so much chaos and unrest and such a feeling of threat and coercively exercise their control over the commercial banks so that people are rendered destitute and desperate and unable to pay their bills. And then they will spike the price of gold back up to something, well, you've probably seen it, Trump trying to arbitrarily declare the price of gold at $10,000 an ounce. Well, this is This is all manipulated. This is all illegal as hell. It's all unlawful. It's all bullshit. And they're manipulating this deliberately to make you miserable so that you'll go along and accept pennies on a dollar as settlement of your claims against these corporations. And they won't even describe it to you in that way. They won't give you disclosure. But say that you're an average American and the British Empire owes you $1 billion. Well, they'll give you a couple thousand a month. And they won't even tell you that they're interpreting your acceptance of enrollment in their QFS system and your acceptance of a account in their system as acceptance of settlement of your inheritance and settlement of their debt to you. So they're just trying another commercial fraud scheme, to put it lightly. But let's also say that we're aware of it. We're aware of the danger of it. We're aware of the progress of it. And we're bringing it to the attention of the entire rest of the world so that everybody is observing it as we're observing it. And they're not going to get away with it. They're still trying. They're still trying really, really hard to sucker everybody again and to somehow come out on top and seize victory from the jaws of defeat. But this is what we can expect, and that's why this is why we've developed a system that is totally independent of their system. This is why we have been working so hard to bring back our gold and silver. This is why we are intent upon having a system that is not in their control, so that there is not the kind of monopolization that they're seeking. They want a monopoly on the banking. And as a result, the average people are looking at suffering, but we're also coming forward with our bank so that they don't suffer. And so I guess the best thing I could say is that every day brings us closer to the magic ripcord moment. And once that happens, you will have options and will not be in a position where you are forced to accept whatever crumbs they will give you. You'll be able to maintain your positions, you'll be able to maintain your inheritance, and you'll be able to maintain your homes and your land. You'll be able to stand by and witness the dismantling of the district court system and all the other things that have been so oppressive for so many years.
Okay, for our next question. What do you anticipate will happen to the monetary system and/or the Federal Reserve when the FRN crashes or becomes obsolete? What will happen to U.S. citizens regarding monetary funds?
Well, all the U.S. capital C citizens will already have moved over to the Fed Now account system, and they'll be getting money as U.S. citizens, even though they're in fact Americans. Okay, this will be part of the bait and swap. This will be part of the entire scheme, is that they get you to give up your land jurisdiction claims in order to get their funny money and keep your noses above water in their system. We're opening the door so that you can walk out of their system into the American system and deal with American money and American empowerment.
Okay, and the next question, part of that question, will all U.S. citizens be required to expatriate individually before they can receive their funds from GFG, or will the system change to be easier to expatriate on a large scale?
It's extremely easy to expatriate on a large scale using the systems that are already in place. You just have to have people that understand what they're doing and make the means to do it available to them. It's getting them to understand why they're doing it and the effect that it has that's important. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are deeply indoctrinated into the British system and don't even realize that it's the British system. So the hard part will be educating people to the degree that they need to be educated. But certainly if you are employed by the military, you're employed by the Federal Civil Service, you're still an American. You can still claim your birthright. You can still claim your nationality, even if you have to accept foreign citizenship obligations as a condition of employment. Now, you may not be able to enjoy your full freedom and all of the guarantees and constitutions and all the things that are most precious until you quit working for the federal government. But you can at least have your claim, and you can be rest assured that when you stop working for the federal government, that you can come home and you can enjoy the freedom that you fought for, and you can enjoy the guarantees that you're owed, and you can receive the land that you are owed back free and clear, and in an allodial title sense. So yeah, this is for all Americans, including those that are working for the military and those that are working for the Federal Civil Service. And it will be simple. I mean, it's just a difference in form, instead of a one-page form that everybody else uses, they'll have their own one-page military form, their one-page Federal Civil Service form. But the effect will be that they retain and revert their own public trust to their birthright. So they will be protected too.
Next question. What will happen to the elderly people that can't handle the paperwork and the stress to stand on their square?
Well, as more and more of us do this, the safer it becomes for everybody, both the elderly and the very young. And so it's just part of our responsibility as the middle-aged and younger people to take up the active part and make it easier for the little ones and for the elders. Certainly the elders in our own families we can care for and assist. And certainly the young children in our families we can care for and assist.
Roger that. Next question. I have friends in the Philippines. Will I have a way to help them get on the land and soil? And how soon will that ability to help free them be available?
Well, the situation in the Philippines is very similar to the situation in a lot of other countries where the land jurisdiction was taken over and people weren't even aware of it, or it was vacated and people weren't aware of it. So there'll have to be a process of repatriation of people in the Philippines, in the same way that there's a repatriation of people in England. And they'll have their own assemblies and their own national government back in their own hands. They'll have their own land and soil back in their own control. And really all that needs to happen is for that education process to take hold, for Filipinos to understand the history that went into this, basically how they got to this point, and then having a simple and straightforward means to correct the situation and take back their reversionary trust interest in their own country and their own government, which is exactly what's going on with everybody else everywhere else. It's going on in Canada, it's going on in Australia, in Germany, in France, and in England, and Canada, and South Africa. So the Philippines and the Filipino people should get involved in setting up their own assemblies and taking back and declaring their own status, their own land and soil jurisdiction birthright, the same as everybody else. And they can do that part through the Global Family LRPS, Land Recording and Publishing Service. And they can get their global bank account at the same time. And that will then make it possible for them to fund their government, to fund their activities, to get their infrastructure rebuilt, to rebuild their schools, to do everything that they need to do.
Okay, next question. Hi, yeah, we have someone from the bank or other people in the Federation come talk to us about what they do and answer questions. from somebody on Florida.
Well, unfortunately, we're all so busy just doing what we actually do that we don't have a lot of time to visit with the individual assemblies and organizations. I try to keep up as best I can with the webinar each week, and other people have other duties where they speak on a regular basis with other organizational elements within the whole structure. But we don't do a lot of public appearances at this point, or a lot of, meet and greet type activities, because the fundamental job of the Federation is international diplomacy and negotiation. And the primary job of each of the state assemblies is to organize their state government. We're basically trying to help the state assemblies get organized at the same time that we're carrying out our actual work. And that doesn't leave much time in the best of conditions to do the sorts of outreach we would like to do. We do, however, have a very good website in the TASA website, and that provides a plethora of information and links and insight into the history and the organization as a whole. And I would recommend that highly to anyone who's interested as an educational resource. There's also over 5,000 different topical articles that I've written over the years that are indexed according to date from oldest to most recent at www.AnnaVonReitz, that's REITZ.com. And it has a search engine. So if you are interested in a particular topic, you can use search words to find articles about that topic. So that's very helpful. Something to remember about that website is that it catalogs years of things that happened in a chronological order. And so the things that are most recent are up to date, whereas the things that are farther in the past may be addressing things that no longer apply, such as when the bankruptcy of the United States Incorporated first occurred. There was an entire series of actions that went on that no longer apply, simply because that part of it has gone forward and we no longer have to take those same actions anymore. So bear in mind that the more timely information is more up to date. So the later articles are the ones that you should study first to get a handle on what you're doing now and why. The rest is historical documentation of a great many things that we've gone through in the past 5 years. So those two sites, the TASA website and the AnnaVonReitz.com website, are just full of different information for you. There are also books. And hopefully as we go forward, there will be more opportunities to meet and greet and actually visit with different assemblies. At least in the past, not in the last 6 months because it's been so busy, but prior to that, I tried to get out and visit with a different assembly a week. And it would just be an hour or two to sit down and answer questions and talk to each assembly. I hope to, hopefully, we'll get some of these things resolved in the international forums, and then we'll be able to step back and devote some more time to the assemblies and start doing those sorts of one-on-one conversations and question and answer sessions with the assemblies after the new year.
Okay, for our next question. My sister's home in Massachusetts went into foreclosure back in April. It is being processed through a superior court, not a district court. I know the district courts were being closed down, but how will this affect my sister's foreclosure, which is going through a superior court system?
Well, I'm assuming that this was a mortgage situation, which may not be correct, but basically all the taxes and mortgages are going to be gone. And it won't matter whether it's being prosecuted through a district court or a superior court. It'll simply be gone. And those obligations will no longer apply to you. And because they never actually did apply to you, you were basically defrauded and misrepresented, and used as the scapegoat for fraud. And so you're going to be released from all of that, and you will no longer have to pay mortgages. You'll no longer have to pay federal income tax. You'll no longer have to pay property tax, utility tax, tax on tax. All that is coming to an end. And the end of the district courts is a wonderful thing, because they've been a terrible scourge and an instrument of criminality in our country. But the greater issues of the tax itself is what's being wound down.
Okay, next question. Is there a place where one can view a Federation financial report?
No. And there's a very simple reason for that. The Federation is self-funded purely on donations as grassroots effort, and it doesn't have a budget. The Congress has not appropriated any money to the Federation, and so it's all just hand-to-mouth daily activities and daily use of funding such as we receive from our supporters. So it's not like we have a budget. It's not like we have a Congress that is meeting and determining a budget or setting an appropriation or anything of that sort. It's just, as I have often said, me, you, and the chickens. And so we've pulled together at each juncture along the way as best we can to deal with the order of the day. Think of it more like the situation at Valley Forge, where you know, every wagon load of food and supplies that the local farmers managed to supply meant life and death to the soldiers in the field. Well, we're not soldiers, but we have been in the diplomatic arena for many years, fighting to secure the positions, the claims, the land and soil and our rights and contracts. It's been a battle of a different sort. But anyway, there isn't that kind of structure in place in terms of the Federation. The Federation just does what needs to be done to the best of its ability with the resources we have. And I can tell you that we have often had the experience of being down to just, a few dollars. And somehow or other, we've managed to do everything that we really needed to do. And I can only point to divine providence for that, and the generosity of Americans who have not only contributed their time, but their money. And yeah, a lot of the people in the Federation are in their 80s. So you're not dealing with young kids, and you're not dealing with people who waste any money. You're dealing with people that are doing this for the right reasons. And so we haven't had the largesse to have a budget. And we've been kept dancing to respond to all of the different twists and turns that the de facto government has offered with its bankruptcies and its commercial claims and its, the constant drama of the territorial government and the politics and the Washington, D.C. Carnival. So at some point here, the states will be supporting the Federation and its activities, and there will be a Congress, and there will be normal appropriations processes, and there will be budgets, and there will be humdrum, mundane business for the Federation to take care of, and I'm sure that at some point this will be a great relief, so that people know, oh yes, we have this money for travel, and oh, we have this money to do this and this money to do that. But right now, it isn't that way, and hasn't been ever. It's always been just a hard scrabble grassroots effort.
There we go. All right, coming for our next question. How is placing a state assembly election notice on something, Bucolic. Don't know what it means, how to say that. Living law any different than posting on our own state assembly website?
The whole idea of public elections is to get the notice of the election before the public, whatever the public may be. So generally speaking, we put our publications on public bulletin boards. They may be electronic bulletin boards in this day and age. It may be, the little shopper publications that have coupons and sale advertisements for different local businesses. It may be posting flyers on bulletin boards. There are all sorts of different ways in which we can reach out to the public and let the public know that we're here and that, yes, we are having elections for these offices. And that's really what it's all about. And the more kinds of different avenues that you can pursue, then the better able to meet that requirement of public notice. So I'm not familiar with that particular, I guess it's a bulletin board or website service, publication service. But I know that many of the different assemblies have tried various means to meet that requirement of their elections process. And as long as it's done with good faith and effort, there's nothing that can be said about it that's inappropriate. It's just a pure matter of letting the public know that these elections are taking place.
Okay, next question. Will marijuana and hemp be legal? My family and I have worked/farmed for years. Will we be able to have these farms without retaliation?
There is no authority in any corner of the government allowing the government to dictate the use of any plant or any drug other than the interstate manufacture, sale, or transport of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. That's it.
The ATF should be a convenience store, not a government entity. Amen.
Well, and as you can hear, tobacco is the only plant that is federally regulated. Now, can they, as a condition of employment, force their own employees to forego the use of hemp or growing hemp? Probably, as a condition of employment, which is a private choice and voluntary act, that you give up your right to use hemp products while you are employed by a federal corporation, okay? But they have absolutely no authority, and no federal regulatory power was ever granted to them to regulate any substance other than those three substances. And also, please note that within the context of the grant of regulatory power over those three substances, it applies only to interstate manufacture, sale, and transport of those substances. So if you are making and consuming a tobacco product within your state of the union, the federales have nothing to say about it. Likewise, if you're producing an alcoholic beverage, say, and you're just using it for your own private purposes within your own state of the union, the federales have nothing to say about it. And they never actually had anything to say about marijuana, but they presumed upon a lot of people and created state-of-state franchise laws, statutes, codes against the use of marijuana. And all of that was overturned because they simply don't have any authority to do that. They don't have any federal regulatory authority attached to any other substance or product. So in answer to your question, yes, you will be able to use cannabis and grow it, and have hemp is an incredibly valuable commodity in terms of all the different things that can be extracted from and made from hemp, quite apart from marijuana and the the health effects and pain-killing effects of the active drug ingredients that are in some forms of hemp. So I think that the answer is a big yes. You will be free to grow whatever you want to grow, and there won't be any kind of government intervention.
Okay, for our next question, I deposited money into the GFG Trust slash vault, and I see the balance as USD in my trust slash vault account, but I don't see the AFD conversion amount. Will I see that AFD amount eventually, and is it usable before the Prosperity and vendor accounts go live? How do I use it?
Well, there's been a lot of confusion over the time period that the vault has been available, and it's basically just that. When you put FRNs into the vault, they are translated into USD because it's an international transaction. And that USD is then guaranteed to be honored as one AFD to each USD that you're seeing in your vault account. And this is a tremendous advantage and benefit to the Americans who are able to take advantage of this at this time, because they just put that money away in the vault as a savings account, essentially. And then when the final exchange rate is declared, which, the exchange rate changes every day, and at some point here, there will be a generalized agreement in which the exchange rate is set, okay? And then whatever the AFD is trading, you'll receive that as a gold-backed, asset-backed currency, replacing your Federal Reserve notes. And they will be equivalent to whatever the value of the AFD is on that day. So say that the value of the AFD on the date that the exchange rate becomes fixed is $330 per AFD. Okay, so you put in one Federal Reserve note in the vault. On the fixed exchange rate day, you'll get one AFD, which is, like I said, it could be 330 Federal Reserve notes worth per AFD. And the reason this is being done is that back in the 1930s, they seized our silver and gave us an IOU called the Federal Reserve Note in exchange. They essentially borrowed all our silver dollars, right? And they set the exchange rate as one Federal Reserve Note to one US silver dollar. So in the intervening years, the value of the Federal Reserve Note has gradually declined until it's worth a tiny fraction of a dollar of silver now. And the Americans have lost all of that without recompense. So this is a way for you to make up the difference in value that was lost over time between when we started out in 1934 and today, almost 100 years later. So think of that as a payback that our bank system is offering Americans simply because they're Americans and they have an opportunity here to redeem their Federal Reserve notes at 1934 prices or better. So, but anyway, the answer to your question is they won't be released early or late. They will be released on the day of opening at the exchange rate established on that day.
Okay. Anna has said mortgages will be gone soon. What about car loans?
Car loans, college loans, all loans that were misrepresented to the public and which you were not specifically obligated to pay. I'm sure it has occurred to everybody at some point in your life that, hey, we're paying out billions of dollars to support all these institutions of higher learning. We're paying their staff fees and their janitorial services and their maintenance and their building programs. We're paying for their electric lights and water and all that stuff. So why don't we get anything back out of these institutions? Why are our kids having to pay tuition? Well, why indeed? You should be getting a full boat ride. Each and every person that wants to go to higher education should be able to do so without any expense at all. And instead, we have young people getting out of college with degrees that have cost them $300,000 and that have hefty annual interest rates. They can work their entire working lives and never pay that off, carry that burden their entire working life, and still owe college costs when they are retired. And that's crazy and arbitrary and wrong. And so all of those things, all these forms of debt where they have actually used your credit and used your assets and haven't cut you in on the deal and have instead forced you to pay the taxes and the expenses and everything else, that has to be reversed because it's not your expense. Okay? It's not your mortgage. You're paying the Queen's mortgage. I'm just going to be real brutal and blunt about that. You are paying the Queen's property taxes or the King's property taxes. And that's not your responsibility. You're not a British subject. You're an American. And so all of that stuff is naturally going to go away because you're an American, because you're not a British subject, because you were never supposed to be saddled with those expenses and those presumptions. And so all of that stuff is just going to go out the window, down the street, out the door, away from America and Americans. And, you know, some of it is going to be very difficult. But no, it's not your debt.
Okay, the next one. Why can't prosperity cards be ordered now so we will have them when GFG goes live?
Good question. They just recently retooled everything so that they could do with one card what it took 3 cards to do at the beginning of the process. So I'm not sure if that final solution card is available to pre-order like that. I'll have to, that's a question I'll have to ask the people that are working on all that.
Okay, next question. Where can we have a list of the vendors?
Yeah, the vendor list should be published right there on the vendor website. There are different like subcategories of different kinds of services and products. And you can actually just hit that category that you're interested in and see any vendors in that category that are already in the system. I understand that we now have something like 3,000 vendors, so that's very encouraging.
Okay, for our next question. On our assembly, we have a chairman and a vice chairman. Could these people be voting should these people be voting in general elections to populate positions?
Why not? I mean, there's no other tradition otherwise. You know, you don't give up your right to vote in an election simply because you accept a public office.
Okay, next question. Anna has mentioned that the med beds need qualified people to administer the treatment. How can someone get trained for that?
Well, all of a sudden, Mr. Trump's administration has clammed up about the med beds. Now that they're actually faced with the likelihood of having to share that technology and make it available to the public, they've adopted a closed mouth, have stopped advertising this and stopped cooperating with us in making this available to the public. And we aren't exactly sure why, whether this was just a narrative and they were lying through their teeth, or they want to keep this technology secret just for themselves. We're not sure at this point.
Okay. Two-part question. Please help contain my runaway imagination. You've used phrases like quite staggering and extremely wealthy and enough to cover financial needs for several generations when referring to the amounts we are due to recoup as a result of the enormous theft of our assets. However, you never actually give an estimate in measurable terms. You have to understand the insane glee that such comments can invoke in the minds of us who have never in our life experienced more than enough conditions. Knowing what you know, approximately how many zeros or figures can one expect to see populate in those accounts once they go live?
Well, you won't see a whole lot populate through the GFG accounts because a lot of the benefit will come from the erasure of debt. Okay, so you won't have any debts, you won't have a mortgage, you won't have a car loan, you won't have all that stuff. And it will also accumulate in terms of benefit when you buy a new house or you buy a new car and you just are able to do it outright, or you go to the hospital and you just pay for your hospitalization and care without like the Medicare service and all that kind of stuff. You just pay for it directly. You can see the kind of benefit that that actually offers everybody. There are also infrastructure benefits that will be made available. But it's going to vary a good deal from person to person, what they need and what is required in terms of the lifestyle that they lead and the investments that they want to make and the houses that they want to live in. And I mean, this is, it's very fluid, it's very individualized, and it depends on an individual case by case basis. What is, what are you going to use out of all of this? Somebody like me who's 70 years old and has basically done what they need and want to do in life, may have nothing but a few medical expenses left to contribute to the whole. And someone just starting out in life with a physical disability might offer a situation where a lot more has to be spent to give them a viable and enjoyable life. So, I wouldn't look at this as, I'm going to be Howard Hughes. I wouldn't look at this in terms of, I'm going to be richer than Solomon and, I'm going to go out and buy myself a diamond studded Lamborghini. This is an inheritance. This has been bought and paid for by 6 generations of Americans who lived in a condition of enslavement and peonage. This is an inheritance that needs to be thought of as an inheritance so that your needs and the needs of your family are taken care of and you don't have to worry anymore about a lot of the costs of life. I mean, think about never having to worry about April 15th again. It's just another day in the calendar. You know, what is that really worth? That freedom. Think of it in terms of not having to worry about how you're going to get your kid through school. Not having to worry about wanting to put in a new garden or a basement or a driveway or, how to improve your home. You're not going to have to go through this horrible process of getting a loan and then paying it back and having a threat over your home until you do. All that stuff is going away. So, think about it in terms of the quality of life and the fact that you will have whatever you really need or want in life um, because of your inheritance.
Okay, time for the second part of the question now. Rather than beta testing the system to absolute perfection before going live, why don't they release the Kraken, in quotation marks and bold? I love the terminology. On us, relative handful of ASNs in the system right now. Use us to find the bugs, if any, and at the same time provide some much needed monetary relief to the faithful few who've been pressing forward with you and your cause. I can guarantee you get such sizable nations of the Federation you'd never need to plead for funds ever again to carry out the work.
Well, that's a nice thought. I like it. Keep talking that way. You know, um, I guess it's because you can't really do something like this in a half measure way. You kind of have to pull the parachute, it's either there or it's not. And, um, I've had this discussion with Hunter on a couple of occasions, and it always comes back down to the same concerns. Number one, the scalability has to be there, because once we open up the floodgates, there will be literally millions of people wanting and needing to get established and have their accounts. And we have to be ready to answer that demand. Now, not all of them are going to be doing this for the right reasons. They're not going to be looking at this as their inheritance. They're not going to be looking at this as a revestment of the public trust, which it is. And so there's going to be a lot of craziness, and we already know that going into it, because it takes time to learn a new system, especially a system as radically different as this will be compared to what we've had. And the learning curve is going to be, it'll even be something for those of us who've been around for a while. And I'm in sympathy with the bankers of what they have to look forward to in unleashing this, okay? So they need to get as much set up and automated as possible. And that includes educational programming and all sorts of other things that can be used to train people and educate people on different topics without having a huge, 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 huge trained support staff and customer service staff. So they have to develop automated learning systems at the same time that they are grappling with all the tech that goes into being able to translate both credit assets and physical assets across 189 different currency markets. I mean, it's just insane, the level of complexity that has to be there and present and working for people all over the world. So I understand why they can't just do a little test market in the US, okay? I understand why they're going to have to be ready and do it so that it works for additional populations as we go forward, because the demand will be so overwhelming that we have to be prepped and ready for that. And we have to have systems ready to do the educational work that's necessary, because we won't be able to just sit down one-on-one and teach everybody. It's going to be something that people will have to master pretty much on their own, on the fly. And so I have confidence that we've made it simple enough that the majority of people will be able to do this without a lot of trouble. But that said, there's a lot more to it than just opening up a ledger and adding and subtracting numbers. And that's why it's taking longer than you might think, is that there are all these other issues, legal issues, educational issues, identity issues, political arguments. It's just a madhouse out there right now. And all of that is swirling around the technological aspects. Now, even such questions as, how do we account for this money? We've picked up 185,000 encumbered accounts from state governments. So what does that mean? Well, it means that money was set aside and apportioned by the state legislature for some project or purpose, and it's just been set on the books and brought forward year after year. and year after year, it just accumulates interest or is used as investment money. And it's never actually used for the purpose that it was set aside for. So you start thinking in terms of out of 6 states, we've got 185,000 of these things. And you get some sort of grasp of just how we don't, what do? You start an account for encumbered accounts, and then you go state by state. So you suddenly have 50 accounts in an account system that is for state of state encumbered accounts. Each one of the states might have somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from, say, $550 billion in these kinds of encumbered accounts, because they're, of course, being managed and reinvested, even though the money hasn't been used for what it was appropriated for. They might have $500 billion in these accounts, and there might be, say, 20,000 such accounts under management, or 40,000 such accounts under management. And you say, well, where are they being managed? Well, they're being managed by gigantic pension funds for state employees. They're being managed by gigantic insurance funds for federal employees. There's just unimaginable things that are out there that we have to deal with. And once you add in the day-to-day record keeping and bookkeeping that goes into a traditional bank system, you just, I wish I could just blink my eye and show you all just how complex this really is. But I guess the good news is that Hunter has stayed on track with his original concept and vision, which has always been very simple. And it just involves people being able to have access to their own credit and assets and be able to buy and sell and trade without obstruction. And so he's remained true to that goal through thick and through thin. And I am absolutely certain that at the moment he has the opportunity to finish things off to the extent that it is safe to ripcord, he will. He absolutely will. And then it will be up to all of you to educate yourselves about the system that you now have at your command, and also to think about your lives in a totally different way in terms of how to make use of money in ways that are appropriate to you, according to your individual needs. I guess one of the best options or best examples I can think of is an argument I recently had with frankly a detractor who was blaming me as if I were personally responsible for every ill that ever happened to this country since 1861, which is ridiculous. And in particular, she was ranting and raging about child protective services, which is a hot button issue for damn near everybody. But the essence of this is that there are children that do need assistance. There are children who are grossly neglected. There are children who are in abusive situations, and they do need to be protected. So if it's not a matter of a lack of money, it's really a matter of a lack of love. And where do you find the tap for that? You can't buy love. You can't buy concern. You can't buy the kind of consideration that a parent has for a child. So how are you going to answer a need that really isn't dependent upon money with money? Doesn't work. Somehow we have to change ourselves, change our society, change our values, and make the effort so that all of our children are treasured and cared for, and the entire focus is shifted not on lack of money. Truly, there's never been a lack of money. We've been bamboozled to believe that there was scarcity, but there's really never been a lack of money. But what increasingly we observe is that there's lack of love. There's lack of consideration. There's lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. Over 40% of all children in this country are now being born into single-parent households. Think about that. And of those that are in single-parent households, we have a significant number of people who are struggling with addictions or with mental illnesses. This is a big social problem. And not all of it can be solved with money. A great deal of it has to be solved by different kinds of resources entirely. So, having been grappling with the whole money issue for the last 10 years, I'm looking forward to the more difficult resource management and resource acquisition, which is to somehow inspire people to think in terms of their own children with love.
Okay, that puts us actually about 15 minutes past 7, boss.
I think it's time to call it because my voice is giving out. I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful holiday with those they love. I hope you make some great memories. I wish you all of the joy of the season and none of the stress and strain. And I hope that everyone has lots of good memories. And I hope that you are all healthy and that you are prepared to be wealthy. Remember, please, that even good things are stressful. And be prepared to take good care of yourselves, to think in terms of rest and health and all the things that go into making a good quality life in the coming year. I assume that we will be doing the webinar next Monday, and hopefully we'll have more news about the banking system and about progress on various fronts then. But in the meantime, may you all have the best Christmas that you can possibly have.
All right. Talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.